I'd much rather take a chance on 10 failed things to find like a passion within one of them or something like that than stay in something that's mediocre.
If it worked, it would change your life potentially, right? Like you think about like how crazy your life would be if like you tried this thing and it worked.
The thing is, we're rewarded when we take risks.
How can I actually help tailor something specific and work with the people that my unique gifts elevate?
Learning how to not talk yourself out of what your instinct is guiding you towards and what your gut is telling you to do, I think is one of the most impactful things you can do for yourself, not just as an artist, but as a business person.
Welcome to the show. Today we have the wonderful Molly McCauley. She is a great friend, amazing businesswoman, educator, photographer, all that fun stuff. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, you nailed it. I mean, my background is in photography and fashion. So a lot of my work on the wedding side and or editorial side, I host editorial workshops through my education. So yeah, you nailed it. It's all things pretty.
All things pretty. I love it. What are you like most excited? Okay, like I'm gonna throw you like a random weird question just to kick off. Like, if you're waking up on a morning, like what gets you most excited? You're like, oh, like this is happening today. Like I am like pumped. I got my 9 hours of sleep. I'm like ready to go. Yeah.
It's funny because I think on any given day, it's different. Like I have ADHD. So like literally it could be anything. I know, neurodivergence all the way. It could be anything at any given point. But I think what I get most excited about, especially right now, which we talked about briefly, is anytime I get to flex my design side of things. As I mentioned, my undergrad was, I have a degree in design, retail merchandising, and photography. So fashion, design, the whole thing really interests me. And because we are such creative people that rely heavily on visuals, especially in the wedding industry, visual aesthetics, design, brand identity, curation, all of that stuff, I really, really geek out on it. And I love helping people see their work in a new light and be excited about the work that they already have, but might just be repositioned a bit. So those are the projects right now that I'm super pumped to. I know most people love handing off like any sort of branding collateral, any of that kind of stuff, like designing like Instagram, like hot take images and stuff like I love that kind of stuff. So yeah, living for it.
No, okay, let's unpack that a little bit because
I know it's a
really
lot.
Cool, but it's a lot. But like, so a little bit backstory. You did fine art masters, like.
Yeah. Like, so my undergrad,
legit. Like, okay. So
yeah,
like, not just like, you
I'm the only,
you didn't take a high school photo class like me. You took a few more classes in education.
I feel like I'm the only photographer, or not only, but I'm one of the few that has multiple degrees, and I have a terminal degree in photography. So it's one of those things, that I think, honestly, I don't talk about enough, but also I think is underrepresented in our field, because I think so many people are self-taught because it's such an easy thing to teach if you have the discipline and creative ability to really kind of put yourself through it to learn the craft. But I have a degree in design, retail merchandising, and photography. With that, I always wanted to work in fashion. For a while, I worked in a fashion house in London, then moved to LA. I used to dress professional athletes. After that, we had to have some life shift, and I decided that I ultimately wanted to be a teacher. I grew up in a house of educators, and I got my master's in fine art photography because the goal was to be collegiate photography professor. That was 13 years ago, and I've never set foot in another college. And art school almost killed me, but we made it on the other side. And in 2021 is when I expanded from just my photography practice to education as well. And it started as editorials, bloomed into mentorship and brand curation. And I have a membership now too. So it's really bloomed into something big, but I'm really loving it.
I love that. Okay, so you did the whole art school. You were going to be a teacher, and then how did you fall into weddings and then stay there for a while before you started like flexing your teaching muscle?
Sure. I love everyone's random ass story. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry. I'm going to swear.
That's all good.
everyone's story of how they got into weddings is so funny. But when I made that move, I'd gotten back to the Midwest from London, was planning on going back, and had a cousin who reached out to me to come help some family out in LA. I moved to LA with like two suitcases, not intending to stay. And then I was there for almost 16 years. So I was just a little bit of time. Huge derail on my life plan. But I knew, I'm trying to backtrack on like how this actually makes sense. I knew that I wanted to do something creative while I was in LA, but I was helping family out. I needed to make money. There were so many elements at play, right? So my sister, who happened to work in events, she was working in Santa Barbara for a prominent event designer at that time. And she was like, hey, I can just get you a part-time job with an LA planner. You can work on weekends, like that kind of stuff. So I was a planner for 7 years. I was in
7 years?
Yes. And there was overlap. So what happened was I started assisting in 2007, and I shot my first wedding in 2009. So for those first 2 years of weddings, I was primarily planning, and I got to a point where I was the first assistant for this prominent LA planner, and I was running weddings of hers. She was running weddings the same weekend. It was a really amazing setup. And then once I started shooting weddings, I realized I wanted to be one of the vendors, not one of the main facilitators. And I had a slow roll into becoming that role and leaving the planning side of things. But yeah, it was really a need for money that I could make on the weekends, and a connection from family.
I love it. And then you started on the planning side, which I think is really cool. I know it's not super common, but I always find it really interesting because you really get a taste of everything, of what goes into it.
And I think that it honestly makes me a planner's BFF once they know like my background and like what I can bring, and that they're never going to be waiting on photography. They're never like, I'm not going to ask you for a vendor meal. Like like any of those things. I truly can be a team player in that aspect. So I do think it's a huge asset. Again, not something I talk about too frequently, but probably should talk about more. But yeah, it's a fun background and very informative background to how I can be a great vendor.
Yeah. And also you started with like a pretty successful planner at the time. So was the caliber weddings, like you kind of jumped into the deep end a little bit?
My first weddings were at Baccara. So it was like I was spending like every weekend at Baccara or the Ritz down in Dana Point or Montage or Laguna or any of those spots. Like it was high level wedding planning, and it was lovely because it allowed me to see what was possible. Because I think a lot of times, especially, it allowed me to see what was possible early on. Because I think a lot of times as creatives, and especially if we're rolling somehow into the wedding industry unknowingly, really being confident in what you can ask for, or what's possible, or what you've seen in terms of design. I think that is what got me really excited when I finally started making some jumps within my own career path, like in the middle of the road there for me, because I'm in year 16. But it was nice because it let me see high caliber events, also how the team worked, how the venues worked behind the scenes, and the type of people that you're dealing with at a certain price point. It sometimes can be interesting. But yeah.
I think that's cool. Like it's jumping off the deep end, because on one hand you'd be like, oh, you're so lucky, like that's so great, but you also got to perform and meet a level of service that everybody else is providing at that level, and like a level of professionalism. And I think it is interesting where a lot of people have the story where you kind of jump in and you do the wedding for $500, and and you're the photographer. There's usually not even a planner, and then you understand what a planner is, but you still are kind of trying to run the day, and like it's a little
running
bit
a timeline as a photographer is just brutal, and we all do it, and we all like, especially even if it's video's not running the time. It's always the photographer. I feel like it always falls on the photographer, and it's I got to a point in my career that it was like, okay, if you don't have a planner, there's an additional fee for me to keep us on time because and some people don't agree with that, but my job gets watered down if I am being more mindful about time than I am about creativity. And I'm doing them a disservice. They're coming to me for my creative craft, for my point of view as an artist. But if I'm like thinking, oh, well, we need to do this. Oh, we only have 7 minutes of this. And it's like, yes, we're already internally doing that. Or, our assistant is being mindful saying, hey, you got 5 minutes here, but we really need to move to this other location. That's a more free way to move throughout a timeline rather than managing it. Are you joking? That is the worst. It's too much pressure. It's just too much pressure.
Well, I think you kind of touch on like the power of like you have one thing you're focusing on, and if you're splitting your efforts, we have a finite amount of energy and just bandwidth, especially if you're being creative. Like your whole brain is stuck in this creative, and if you start having to split back and forth, it's impossible to actually multitask. You're just splitting back and forth.
Right.
I forget what book it was. And the one thing it was just talking about how we have this lie that we tell ourselves we can multitask, and really, even when computers do it, they're just switching tasks very quickly. So as people, we're not computers. So
let me say
yes.
Those who are on the neurodivergent scale, like me, and I don't know anyone else who has ADHD, we thrive in that kind of situation. So oftentimes we either step into it because we feel like we can, or by nature, we are just good at being squirrels. And so oftentimes I feel like we really put our foot in it, but it also is a personality trait that sometimes lends to us being able to like multitask better than others.
Oh, I agree. I'm the same way where I can on a day, I'll just bounce task to task, and I love helping people. So if someone's on the team needs something, I'll just drop everything, but then I drop what I'm doing. And as a photographer, there's enough even on the creative side that you are bouncing around, and I think that's where that can lend itself really well. But when you're doing the planning and all that side, it definitely can be a lot. So it definitely that makes sense. But okay, so planning, now you're doing photography, and then you said 17, like now what point did you stop working with planners and you started, like when did you launch your photo?
Yeah, I launched photo in 2009. I had been doing photo before that in different capacities. I was working in fashion. I was working with influencers in LA. But my first wedding was late summer of 2009. And for an additional 4-ish years, I was doing double duty. So because I was still newer on the photo side of things, I wasn't booking out a lot of weddings. And I definitely was not booking out weddings at the scale that I had been working on as a planner. So for me, it was advantageous to keep both kind of going simultaneously. And then once we shifted gears and we, meaning I, once I shifted gears, I knew that I needed to focus solely on photography to eliminate any confusion, which hurt some feelings. And on both sides, I think that it was just like a sad way to end the planning side of things, because I wished that I could have transferred into a vendor in her eyes, but unfortunately I didn't. And I just was no longer able to keep both things going and have my heart in it. So solo photo, it went by, 2013, 2014, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, 2013. Yeah.
Yeah. No, so it sounded like, how did you come up with that decision where like, this is my thing that I need to focus on, like my passion, and like, this is like the next step? Because I think that's a hard thing where you can get stuck up. I get stuck, and I think that idea of like, I'm reading this book called Necessary Endings, which is like really, really good. But it talks about like, good. Sorry,
That's like a great title. That's like a great title.
It gets you. And it actually, and I was like, okay, it sounds like a book of like, okay, if I need to end things and like scale back and not doing a million things, but it gets way more like practical, which I really like. But it talks about pruning, and like if you have like a rose garden and you have to take out like the dead stuff, or if there's ones that are just not as promising. So, but the key is, so you get the analogy, you're like, this is great. You could read the book. I won't waste time doing the analogy, but you probably get the idea. But
Yeah.
that's like, great. Okay. I know what a rose looks like. But if I
Mm-hmm.
don't know what I'm looking for, if I can't identify that core why, what I'm going after and what that like target kind of like true north is, how do I identify that? So I think that's a hard thing that, I mean, me and Jessica will get stuck up on and try to figure out. So how did you kind of
Yeah.
just like intrinsically, whatever the word
It
is,
is
but
it is
yeah,
intuition though. Really
yeah.
it is. Like you have to be able to, and I think something that most artists are good at is following our gut and having an intuition about where we should be. And I don't know about you, but like my gut has rarely steered me wrong. Even if it's a hard and scary moment, like in it, work or friendships or relationships, making hard decisions in any of those, you really have to be able to sit with yourself. And for me, when it came to making that decision to go solo photo, instead of having the additional side gig of the planning, it was more of a what makes any energy that I'm putting not towards photo, I'm taking away from photo, which means I'm not allowing myself to fully grow there, but also what are the things that like make me happy? Like what, even if it's not making me money yet, what are the things that make me happy? And it's like, okay, I'm fine still doing multiple things. Like I'm fine doing a side gig that doesn't interfere with the photo aspect of things, or working in something that complemented it. Like I worked for, I helped open like a gallery in West Hollywood, and I worked in the gallery there for 2 years, and that supported it because I was around creative work. I was around artists. I was around a really high level clientele and high level collectors. So seeing art, being able to curate there, being able to talk really in depth with people about meaning, allowed me to really kind of focus on what got me excited. And for me, it was making people feel really good about themselves and fashion. And within the wedding world, New York Bridal Fashion Week, Barcelona Bridal Fashion Week is going on right now. Like there's so many great fashion wedding crossover moments. And because fashion has become such a prominent part of weddings now, where, couples are having 1, 2, 3 outfit changes throughout a day, it's really fun for me. So for that part of it, it's what gets me excited. Like what do I go back to, and like what would be fun for me? Like what would I do because it's fun, not just because I'm getting paid, but because I like it. And that I think has been the true north. Anytime I've come over this 16 years in the industry of shooting, when I've come to, a divergence in path, right? Where it's like, okay, which way am I going? Really just following the fun, I think has allowed me to have the longevity of the career that I've had without getting bored. And as soon as I get bored or stagnant, I know something needs to change. Like I had a huge revelation in 2019 where, Southern California has a certain aesthetic and I no longer liked it. I no longer wanted to shoot weddings that all looked the same. Everyone was planning the same stuff, designing the same stuff, shooting it the same way. And part of me was like, no, I just don't like it. And I did a complete overhaul, which is now what I offer other photographers too, in the form of workshops and or brand identity and visuals. But I did the first overhaul was actually myself, and that was in 2019. And I created a bunch of editorials that were designed with the aesthetic and fashion forward way of thinking that I was intrigued by, not necessarily what my clients had been booking me for, but what I was intrigued by. And that was not an aesthetic that necessarily blend into Southern California or the California kind of vibe. But what was lovely about it is as soon as I established that this is what I love, I was the one person that was doing it this way. And within that rebrand and within the launch of that site, even though it happened 3 weeks after COVID and the world was shutting down and events in California were practically non-existent, I still booked my 3 highest paying weddings to date at that point because I felt so aligned with the work and I felt so excited to shoot stuff that was aligned with what I had been showcasing. And what I realized was I was like, oh, my clients are really New York or Chicago, but they're getting married in Southern California. That's why obviously the obvious expansion to the East Coast and the New York market in 2021 was a no-brainer for me. So a lot of my work actually now is on the East Coast because I'm split between those two markets. But follow the fun. Like, it's the only way for you to not hate your life at the end of the day. And like, it makes the wedding hangover a little more bearable.
Okay, that was so much gold, and I feel like we could talk for hours about like so many things you said. Just like through this story was like so great of just, but I love it. It comes back to following the fun, and I think what you said was really good. Of like, how do you find that balance of making those decisions and finding that true north? Where a lot of it is saying no to things so you can say yes. And I think like as like I think probably relatable to you too, of like being a little bit more ADHD and like you kind of I have a habit of saying yes to a lot of things because I don't like saying no. But understanding that saying yes to something is also saying no to something else.
Right.
And if you can find out, it sounds like it's okay to still do multiple things if they're complementary, instead of realizing, oh, is one supporting my efforts or is one derailing it to something else? I think that's a big difference, because you're like, oh, I still did, like, I opened up a museum, sorry, not museum, a gallery.
The gallery.
Like that helps support of like understanding clientele. And like, to me, it's like, if you go with the rose garden analogy, that could be viewed as like you're putting a stake to help it grow up, or you're like giving it like fertilizer to grow, or you're going to look to see another rose garden and be like, oh, this is what it looks like when it's fully matured. This is the input they did. Okay, now I know what I'm looking towards. Versus if you have a perspective, which I think is like whether it's looking to coaches or mentorships of like with other people to see, okay, how did they get there? What does a fully developed version of this look like at that next stage? And now how do I go replicate those things? And I loved what you said about gut decisions too, where like the truth of sometimes we get so rational, especially I feel like in the US, and it's just like, how do I find this logical progression? But usually like your subconscious mind isn't just like making things up. It's way smarter than we give it credit. And
we're usually talking ourselves out of what our instincts usually are. And that's the unfortunate bit, is I normally am very good at following my like instinct to, and I'm decisive. I think I feel for people who really sometimes don't trust themselves in decision making. I know that when I've got my eye on something, my husband laughs, because anytime I ask him, what do you think about this? Or I'm contemplating doing this, he knows, he's told me, he goes, I know you've already made up your mind and you're looking for support. And so I love that he knows that about me. But
that's a great relationship.
He definitely knows that about me. But I also am like, if there's something I want to try, why not try it? Even if it completely blows up, it's like, okay, well then I learned something, or I know that this isn't going to work for me, or that type of working relationship isn't going to work, or that system model or whatever. But learning how to not talk yourself out of what your instinct is guiding you towards and what your gut is telling you to do, I think is one of the most impactful things you can do for yourself, not just as an artist, but as a business person, because you know when there is a red flag client, you know when there's a red flag planner, and sometimes you talk yourself into it because you need the money. And listen, I get it. A paycheck wedding is sometimes necessary, but we are not so desperate that we need to betray ourselves in effort to fit in or people please or say yes for the sake of saying yes. So I think that's really something that I continually work on, and I encourage a lot of like students of mine that like trust yourself, like figure out how you can trust that voice that's leading you in the direction that you ultimately deep down want to go.
Yeah, which I think just giving permission and knowing that that's actually a good way to make decisions is a huge just mental. I think one of the things that I love talking about is just like how many different, like what are the lies you're believing or the lies that you're buying And what does it cost you? Because like lies, like I love the thing of like buying, because it's like you're paying a price for them, for believing them. Like you are paying a price, like whether it's like how much money you could make or how much free time, what type of relationships you could have with like family or your kid. Like it's, we all start with a blank slate, and it's just what are the beliefs you're believing. So
yeah. And I'd much rather take a chance on 10 failed things to find like a passion within one of them or something like that than stay in something that's mediocre. I get bored way too fast, and it's not sustainable. Unless you don't have a personality. And most of us have personalities in this industry. That's why we're creative. That's why we seek to be of service to others. We have all these callings. So for me, I would much rather try a million things and see how it works on the chance that you find gold than not be the one brave enough to explore.
Oh,
like,
that is so. Have you read 4 Hour Workweek? Are you familiar with Tim
no,
Ferriss?
I don't read. I listen. I listen to audibles.
Okay.
I listen to audibles because
That
I
counts.
don't read.
I
know.
Audibles are books. You can't.
I know.
Okay,
I know.
That, so you got to count that. Okay. Anyways, I think he has like something on his blog, but Tim Ferriss, the author, he talks about like, I think he calls it fear setting. And it's the idea that you're talking about where like, usually if like you have these 10 ideas and one could be like, if it worked, it would change your life potentially, right? Like you think about like how crazy your life would be if like you tried this thing and it worked. But so often we're crippled by fear but like I have to give up some sort of like security or illusion of security, or even that security may just mean like a constant, even if that's a constant of a suckiness, like it could be something like, oh, you're stuck in something uncomfortable, but I need to let go of that to try this. But usually what he says is if you rated it like a 3 out of 10, if you look back like a couple of years later, and if the worst case happens based off of making that risk, that's usually like a 3 out of 10 pain, at least like on a long term. Like, especially maybe it's like, okay, I lost my house and now I had to go find an apartment to rent. And for a year or two, I had to get my feet back on the ground. Like that would be like a pretty drastic thing. Usually they're not even that bad. But looking back in your 60s or 70s, you may be like, oh yeah, that was like a blip on the radar.
Totally.
But if you tried this business or did this pivot where you're like, hey, I'm only going to work with this type of clientele, or like redefine and distill down what your core like passion is, and that worked, look, your life trajectory is like, it's like 1,000x
wild
difference.
Wild.
And I think that's where it's just,
I mean, I just think too, so many of us, me included, for the longest time, how many of us make decisions based on what other people are doing? And it's like, oh, okay, like as soon as I somewhat, like obviously I'm aware of what competitors and friends and colleagues and all that kind of stuff are doing in the industry, but as soon as I put blinders on of like, okay, that works for them, I know that doesn't work for me. So whether it's I get bored and I want a creative outlet somewhere else, or I know I'm not willing to take on those timelines anymore, so I'm not willing to book a wedding that doesn't have a planner. So learning and then having to withhold those parameters and boundaries like within your business of like saying no to the wedding. You know, that it starts to set the tone, because as soon as you start putting out there of, hey, I have this baseline that I'm willing to operate from, that's where things start to then operate from. Listen, and when you were saying it earlier, I had the thought of like, when you're in it, it really sucks. It really sucks, and it doesn't feel insignificant. It doesn't feel like a 3 out of 10, and it doesn't feel like it's ever going to be a blip. And hindsight, that's what makes hindsight amazing. When you're in it, it sucks. But the thing is that like we are creatives. Our name in the title is a creative, meaning we are creative problem solvers. So if there's one thing you're going to bet on yourself, because you know what you can handle, you know what you can do, you know what you're capable of. And if I'm going to bet on anybody, it's going to be me, not the Joe Schmo down the street who is booking $3,000 weddings because they're not brave enough to raise their prices. It's just not a place to operate from. So, I mean, we can go on this all day.
Oh, I know. I mean, the limiting beliefs, I think you got limiting beliefs, and then you got like a scarcity mindset of like, oh, like just even like competitive or what are other people
Yeah.
doing?
And they all come at the same time. Let's not pretend that like, oh, we have one random scary limiting belief when the rest of us is thriving. Usually the roller coaster of entrepreneurship is truly that. You're going to be on a downslope and then you're going to say this really sucks, but then you're finally going to hit the valley and you're going to be like, this fucking sucks. Like this sucks. But then you're going to get that little blip of hope by one booking or being re-inspired by something or whatever. And then that trajectory starts going up again because that mindset starts to change. And listen, it's a pattern. And any high performing business owner is going to tell you that there's no perfect way to do it. And there's no getting there. There's just learning how to, navigate the road maybe a little smoothly, or maybe then you have a bigger team that is able to help you and you have more resources. There's still, listen, the amount of problems that you get at the luxury level are infinitely more higher risk, I would say, than what we're dealing with in like a budget level or mid-market area or space that we're in. So it's not that they ever go away. It just changes and we're more adept at dealing with it.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. I mean, there's so many, I mean, just the idea of how, as you develop as a creative and understanding like, well, I guess, okay, one, the seasons. I think you touched like the valleys and how it goes up and down. The other book that I'm only like 3 pages in, but he was talking about like the pruning. But if you think basically like, things go through seasons where, okay, like, and as you refine what you're doing and who you're serving and what your core, like your own personal why is, like, what is your true north? You're constantly, it's like a funnel that you're constantly stripping away and getting more and more specific. And like for you with your own art of like, okay, I know like fashion focused, Chicago, New York, but their destination, like that is such a more specific thing than luxury. You're like, okay,
yes,
you know what I mean? But you're able to serve because now you're helping them specifically what they need. So you've been able to find a way to keep on like whittling down that like statue of like, what is this?
Exactly. And I think one of those things, to get to your pruning analogy, we're really in the garden a lot today. But like planting the seeds, right? Like if you plant the seed, you're not getting the fruit immediately. Like you have to allow it to bloom. And part of the thing is with a lot of creatives, I think myself, and I'm sure you in general, like I'm a very impatient person. Like if I decide something, I want it yesterday, and or like I want changes. That's why so many of my offers are actually intensives. It's like, if we're doing an overhaul, which is a total brand intensive, it's a 2 to 3 week process because I'm not going to wait 8 to 12 weeks for a new brand with somebody else. I get it. I understand that is how maybe, a deep brand identity should be formed. I'm dealing with aesthetics. We can move past that, and we can make a huge impact in such a short timeline. That's how I like to learn. It's how I like to work. That's why I teach it that way. But we have to allow the time for things to mature. And as you said, in terms of like just knowing what's possible too, is sometimes it doesn't bloom, sometimes it doesn't grow, and sometimes it doesn't work. But what's lovely is that when you maybe come across a hiccup in let's say take COVID, for example, anybody who had alternate streams of revenue at that time was thanking their lucky stars that they planted those seeds a year, 2 years, 3 years prior, because they were able to stay afloat. And there were so many creative entrepreneurs, specifically in the wedding industry, that didn't make it. And it's because we have all of our eggs in one basket. So figuring out, where you're planting those seeds to really build your business and your confidence and ability to like provide for yourself and be a sustainable person and have a long lasting career, you just have to be able to go with the flow and wait for those rewards.
Yeah. Which I think something you touched on is with the seasons, if you're planting seeds, if you don't know what season you're in or acknowledge that there are seasons, it can be really frustrating and scary. If you're like, well, why isn't anything coming? And you're like, well, it's spring, you just planted it. Or it's summer and it's like a little buds up. You're like, this isn't like, I thought it was going to feel different. You're like, well, yeah, because you haven't got to the harvest yet. And then if winter comes, you're like, I'm doing something wrong. But there are seasons where it does go down. And like for us, I know with COVID, like we were primarily weddings and some commercial work. And we were like, what are we getting? And we were planning, reached out like right before to a copywriter. And then we were planning on doing this mastermind. And we're like, oh, do we spend the money on this when our whole business could be falling apart? And I'm so thankful that we did, because it was actually like, it was winter. Like that's the time you fix your machines.
Oh, it's
you come
the
in,
best
like,
time.
Yeah. Cause
I
you have all
know
the time.
winter. Exactly. Winter is the time for rest and like just really being able to, identify maybe like where those weak spots are. That's why it's like there's so many times, like right now we've talked so often this year about how people are feeling about our industry in general, people getting married, how much they're willing to spend, people's buying cycles much longer. Like there's all these things that are making people really worried, especially the folks who just started during COVID, where they were really kind of just like getting on the ground running during that whole surge. That was not sustainable. That's not how we operated for many years prior. But it's one of those things where it's like, just being able to allow yourself time to reflect is so important. That's why your season analogy is like so spot on, because that downtime allows you actually to like work, what is it, in it, on it, whatever that version is. And yeah, like just being able to do that deep work then, so that when you are showing up in that busy season or whatever that is, that you are still showing up as your best self because you've done the work.
I love that. I think what you touching on when you start the business and you're by yourself, you are in your business and you're kind of working on it, but you don't really have any chance to take a breath up and have perspective. You're swimming with your head down, breaststroke, because you're not on a boat. You're by yourself. And if you're not swimming, you're not going anywhere.
Right.
But the nice thing about the winters is there's no swimming, like there's no going. So you're kind of forced to either, you're going to keep on like swimming, going nowhere, or you could pause for a second, get your feet on the ground and see, okay, what's working on the business? What seeds do I want to plant coming up in spring to get what I want? So I don't keep on just doing the same hamster wheel.
Totally.
And I think the cool thing you kind of touched on too is as you grow, you get the ability to refine what you're doing and maybe bring on a team, like whether it's a coach, whether it's somebody like on your team, and it could look different for everybody. Like for us with like Hugo Atelier, our passion behind it was empowering luxury creatives to thrive. And that looks like a lot of different things. Like we have our post-production studio, but there's a lot of other ways that people can get stuck, and we're not meant to do things by ourselves. Like you have like, if you can refine down what your core gifting is, that's where you also get to a point where you could be working on your business year round, because you actually have the support in place to get everything else working. But I think as an artist, it's hard because sometimes we view that as like, oh, does that mean I need to hire shooters and I need to hire all these people? And I'm like, no, like I think that's like a lie where it can go like that. But I think as a luxury photographer, like you could be like, no, like my performance days, like I'm almost more like an athlete. Like I come up and I can do a really amazing thing and create art in a high pressure situation. But you need to be able to have rest and be like filled up to come do that for that like 10, 15, 20 weekends a year.
Yeah.
And in that gap, like how are you filling yourself up?
Totally. And I think too, as you're a developing like artist and building your business, it's like you said, it's going to look different for everybody. If somebody comes out of the gate swinging and it's, they have this wild surge of business and they need the support, then yeah, like most people don't outsource when they really like should, only because we're scared to either give up control or we're scared to, put that money out there because we're not making as much as we want or whatever. There's so many things. The thing is, we're rewarded when we take risks. And the problem is that the most finicky thing with a solopreneur, entrepreneur like us, we're creatives. So we usually like recharge around others. We love being collaborative. We like all that, but we are by ourselves all the time, which always allows us to second guess our decisions unless you have like an accountability pod or a coach, like you said. But these hires, they're usually a slow roll. And unfortunately, when you don't have a huge budget, your first hires might give you really bad experiences and can put a bad taste in your mouth to where then you don't want to invest in somebody else in the future, or you're scared to do this. And it's in an unfortunate cycle that I think a lot of us have gone through, especially all of us who have weathered a decade more of the storm of entrepreneurship. But I do think that like continuing the trial and error of finding support, whether it's a coach, whether it's a VA, whether it's the person doing the tasks that you know you're not going to do but would move your business forward, figuring out how you can, divvy up those roles, I think is really important, and do it before you're ready. You're never going to be ready.
Yeah. No, and I think that's good though, because there's so many where people could say you need to get a VA or you need to outsource to a post-production company, or there's so many different things. But understanding, I think first you need to take a step back and what is your core, your own why, and you can always refine it. Like for me, I was doing this whole mind map exercise, which I love doing. I don't know if you ever, it's helpful. Just do a piece of paper. I love them. And always I'm like, wow, there's a lot more up there than I thought.
Brain dumps are
dude,
severe in this house.
So great. But I was finally like, okay, well, I'm trying to like help people understand what it is. I'm like, I should know what mine is. And it was kind of getting to the idea of like, okay, well, I'm doing multiple things and like different businesses. Like we have our wedding brand and then we have like our marketing company. And so I'm like, okay, but I am refining what I'm doing though. And I've done things where I've tried to do too much. But when I finally realized, okay, what is the core thing that I'm like, that fills me up and I feel like I'm decent at? And it was like, oh, helping other people uncover value that's right in front of them.
Gosh, how much are we overlooking just because we can't get out of our own way?
Dude, it's crazy where I'm like, I could be on a call and you're like, there's this opportunity right here. Your eyes are just closed.
Let's be uncomfortable for 5 minutes so that we can have 10 great years.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Like I love that. What you just, that's a really good, cause it's like, okay, how do we refine where it's not just like, okay, back to the garden. Cause that's where we're, I like
we
this.
love it. We're really invested in the garden.
I'm glad you like analogies. Cause I can't shut up about them. It drives Jessica crazy, but you're like having a farm, right? And you're now we're plowing. We got like corn or something. I don't know. And someone's like, you know what you really need to like grow is like, you should have a store here so people could come and buy directly. But you're still plowing it all by hand and you have no one helping you. Mm-hmm. You're like, I don't know if that's really the best use of energy
or
when
time.
You could get a tool or time because you're still stuck in the bottleneck. But if you're not doing rows of corn and you're like, hey, I just grow one really good tomato a year and the way I do it's amazing. It's like a $10,000 tomato. Maybe you should get the store, hire someone to market it. Cause you could do that yourself and that's your magic sauce, but understanding like how you roll in your business, because it's going to be different for every person.
People are buying that $18 single strawberry from Air One. I mean, it's that there is a market for everything and there is a way to do the most obscene things and make money. Like
you got to get back to like, okay, what is that core thing that I think, like, like the 80-20 rule.
Yeah.
Like if you can figure out what is that 20% for you and then get help. Similar thing in Dan Martell's book, Buy Back Your Time. I think for us as creatives, it's such a unique business compared to like an ice cream shop or all these other small businesses you see or large corporations that we don't really understand because you're not working in them, but you just see like, oh, this is how business works, right? And you're trying to like, okay, I need to hire people, but it's kind of like uneducated through the sense where like, oh, I just need to hire someone to help do what I do. So I'm going to hire a photographer versus his point is don't hire to grow your business traditionally, hire to buy back your time. And the way you figure out what that time is like, where are you wasting your time in things that you could have someone that you don't like to do? And it would be like pretty cheap to have someone else do. And then you can identify those things first. And I think to your point, Molly, is like so many people like either hire poorly because they don't think they have the budget for, or it's in the wrong spot and they can't train them up. Where definitely if you're at that point, Buy Back Your Time is a really good book. We started hiring and then we started hiring a lot. And then I started reading that book and realized like, oh, I just started
now we're scaling back.
Yeah. And like, we made a lot of mistakes doing that because I got like an itch for it, but I'm like, oh shoot, like maybe we're just hiring.
But that's also,
it's
also a part of being a business owner. It's like you sometimes have to fumble through and sometimes you make really great decisions and sometimes you make others. And firing somebody is never fun. But like that is also part of being the boss. And I think that something that I think gets overlooked is that we oftentimes we get too caught up in what we think we should be doing or how things operate, but we have no idea how that other person is operating their business. We only know how you're operating. And it's funny, like you bring up these other types of businesses. Most of us, like with the exception of like an album or flowers or something like that, like we're not really selling a product, we're selling a service, and like, how does time equate money? And then like, how are we, there's so many parameters that I think feel subjective in our industry and in our craft in general, that I think a lot of people have a hard time quantifying. So it's like, you naturally have to test the waters, and that might be hiring too much and then needing to fire people, or it might be not hiring people soon enough and really realizing that you set yourself back a couple of years, how much further your business could be. Like, that's what I think. I think if I would have taken myself seriously, I did not think of myself as a business person for the first like 4 years while I was still doing that wedding planning stuff. I didn't take myself seriously as a photographer. So for me, it's like, imagine what I would have done had I really taken that seriously. Imagine what my life would have looked like if I did accept that internship with Elizabeth Messina. Imagine what I would have, where my business would be had I made different decisions. But at the end of the day, we just have to be okay with the decisions we make. You can be frustrated, but move forward. Like acknowledge, hey, I hired too many people. Okay, now where are we scaling back? Because where is the biggest impact? Okay, well, if I don't need somebody manning that vegetable stand, really I need the person doing the social media for it so that, they can just come pick it up whenever. We don't have to have some office hours or store hours. Like there are systems and successful business practices that are pretty universal, and it's just identifying them for your business.
Yeah. No, I think that's really good. Just summing it up of I think getting rid of those mental blocks that are holding you back, and then understanding, okay, how can I take risk? And I think we can be really by nature, some of us are more than others, but we're very risk averse. Like, we're always going to prioritize saving what we have than risking to get the better opportunity. But we also we tend to measure against what we lack. Oh, we're not at this point yet, and this is where we're falling, when really that should just be a true north of what you're looking towards. But it's a mirage in the desert that you're never going to get. And if you always treat success as this destination, you're never going to get there. But if you could do it as just a true north, it's I'm not using my compass to get to the North Pole. It's just to know where my bearings are,
because
and then
guess
I
what?
can measure how far I came.
Yeah, when you get to the top, when you're a Marcy Bloom or a Lynn Easton or a Jose Villa, they still have goals. Do you think that they're just all of a sudden satisfied and just living life like smoking a cigar? No. They literally are thinking, how can I scale? How can I build? What are the things am I interested in? How can I monetize on that? There's just constant leveraging and constant pivots, whether that means expansion or a true pivot of changing the roadmap. There are so many people who do something for 10 years and you're like, hey, guess what? I don't like it anymore. Be brave enough to figure out what you do like and go there, So it's crazy how much we get in our way.
I love what you said, where people view something as a destination, giving a good example of okay, someone who's actually at the top. And there's two, I think, lies that people believe is either, why do they still want more? Because that's greedy. Or are they never satisfied? I'm well, it's not that you're chasing success. It's that success to me is a verb. It's a action where it's are you using the gifts and resources that you've been entrusted with to grow? And if you believe though that wealth or resources are limited, that looks really selfish. But I'm we literally are creatives. We create. You have a vision. It's the nothing that you create out of is something in your head, and you turn it into something that has value that people exchange for money or time. That's just the currency of how we exchange it. But you're actually creating something where if you help somebody and you do an overhaul and you charge whatever it is, and they suddenly double their prices and their revenue goes from $200,000 a year to $400,000. Where did that 200 come from? You got you're getting compensated to do that. And that's it's the, there's this other story. If you you got an old car, from the junkyard, and you restore it, and it's actually this old Chevy, whatever. And
this
it's
vintage collectible.
Yeah. This vintage collectible. It was sitting there, say you paid $100. And then let me take a step further. I paid some guy $5,000 to fix it up. And now it's worth 50. Where did that come from? It was created. So I think that's where some people can look up at these people and oh, are you just do you never have enough? And you're like, well, no, it's not the game I'm playing.
I
Like, I want
saw,
to keep on creating value.
yeah, I saw something recently on Instagram or something where it was like a meme or one of those like inspirational posts, whatever. And it resonated and it hit hard because it was one of those statements that I'm just like, whoa, like a whoa statement that I think that hits on what you're talking about. And it essentially said something along the lines of, it's not that I'm never satisfied. I'm just continually raising the bar. So it's one of those things of like, because there is no there, right? Like we've set a goal, we get there, but we set a new goal, right? There's no like, and we might have some plateaus somewhere, but it just really hit me because it was like, okay, like it's not that it's never going to be enough. It's just that like goals change and the bar is continually raised. And if you are a tastemaker or a leader in the industry, there are people that are looking to you to be that creative voice in an industry too. So I find it very fascinating at the endless amount of creativity that these high performing and high producing creatives seem to put out because it seems exhausting. But again, like I said, at that level, you have teams to help implement.
Well, you have teams. And if it's like, to me, I think they're like when you talk about burnout, like burnout could either because you're doing way too much or you're bored. And for me, I'm like, we hit a point in our business like 2 years ago at some point where we're like, making good money. We had a team outsourcing. So we were maybe working like, I don't know, like we had our weddings and maybe we'd answer emails for an hour a day or go to the beach.
Yeah.
Like we had like a pretty chill, I'm like, I think like I even like, not to sound clickbaity, but it's like, we worked so hard when we broke like 100,000, but like, I don't know what year this was, but like we broke over 300,000 and we were like barely working. And I was like, but also I was kind of bored. Like it was
like
great.
stagnant. There's a stagnant energy.
Yeah. And there's two things. One, when we broke 100, I was like, well, I kind of want to keep growing, but at that point, the only way I knew how to grow was just work twice as hard.
Right.
And that's where I was like, oh, everyone who must be making a ton of money must be like, have no life.
Nonstop. Right.
And have terrible relationships and all these things. And you're saying like, how do they even have the capacity? And then I realized if the answer is actually to do less and I just focus on doing what I love, that's actually the best. Like if you look at like the people, if they're actually able to now, because they have the team or the, like whether it's the automation systems or team and a mix of all those, and you get to spend your time doing what you're really good at and it fills you up. Now you're focusing on your passion, and it's a passion where it's like the money is just a byproduct because you're increasingly providing value. And if your focus is on bringing that value, the money just comes because you're serving people at a higher level. And as you get better at serving people, whether it's through like wedding photography or coaching or like there's so many things. And as you can keep on finding what that focus is, like I think for you it's really interesting where you're serving these clients for these weddings, but you're also doing these brand overhauls. But I know we're going a little long, but I want to touch on that in a second because I think that's a really unique thing where how do you like balance like how that lets you not actually get burned out but almost get fueled more, because in one way you could view that from the outside like, oh, you're doing so much. But how in that are you actually focusing on doing less because you're just focusing on your unique gifts and how like it can apply. You have like each job, like you have a business and there's all these things that need to get done. And then you have this other business, but you're like, oh, well, these 2% of both businesses, like that's my thing that like no one else in the world can do because no one else is Molly McCauley. And this is my like vision. Like, how did you kind of does that make sense? Like finding like those like overlaps where you actually are doing less, but from the outside, it could look like, oh my gosh, I can't do what Molly's doing because she's just got like 48 hours in a day.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting. And I have help. So like I have an assistant, I have like teams that like are not necessarily even full-time employees, but learning how to leverage relationships and people's strengths. And I haven't done this yet, but I did hear in terms of hiring or that kind of stuff, taking a strengths finders test, knowing what you're good at, and then being able to look for the complementary where like you lack, looking for the people who fulfill those roles naturally is usually a good place to start. However, I mean, that's a totally different thing, but I do have help, and
I can talk a lot about that.
I know I do have help, and I'm grateful for that. When I was doing it all, I had to choose the things that fell by the wayside, right? Writing blogs was not going to happen for me. I just knew that. And even though I knew that blogs potentially could get me a surge of inquiries or an influx in brand awareness or any like SEO or whatever. I just knew it wasn't happening because it was the very bottom thing on my interest list. And I was like, I'm not going to sit down and I'd have to be in the mood, but B, like writing all these blogs, batch blogging or whatever, like it just wasn't going to happen. So again, I think it goes back to following the fun and the things that I find interest in. And so for
not
me,
try to do it all. Like,
yeah,
sounds like
not try to
yeah.
do it. Yeah, not try to do it all. And if and when I can, outsourcing to fill those gaps. So for me, it's like wedding industry, really just taking on weddings that are interesting to me, where the clients are aligned in the sense where they have a fun fashion sense, or they're interested in fashion, that they're focused on their clients or their guest experience, that they are really focused on design and implementing interesting design and not being, another regurgitated carbon copy of whatever they saw in Style Me Pretty 3 years ago, whatever that is, right? So that's how I stay invested and interested in my wedding business. But for my education, it's been an evolution. It started with workshops. It went into mentorship, but then that form of mentorship changed because I found that doing one-to-one mentorships was very rewarding, but it was so much time for the amount of people I wanted to reach. So for me, it made more sense to focus on a membership so that I could have group coaching and a group atmosphere so that they'd create community, but they'd also have access to me, at a lower price point, but also a more frequent and ongoing relationship rather than these short little sprints. So, just being aware and understanding that just because you decide to offer something doesn't mean that it has to continue in that same framework, that it can evolve and it can change, so that it still does fulfill you and light you up. And for me, like we were talking earlier, really it's the link between fashion photography and weddings is really just kind of like the avenue at which that happens for me. So it's like it just happens to be in the wedding industry. So I am shooting on behalf of my wedding and like photography business, New York Bridal Fashion Week. My clients love that I shoot at New York Bridal Fashion Week. They love knowing that their photographer shoots, for these designers. So that lends really well to it. That also lends well to attracting the type of client for my membership or my overhauls or any type of student mentee mentorship relationship that I have. It lends really well to that because, sorry, my dogs are very excited about this conversation too.
They're really fired up.
Yeah, they're like, yes, they do really benefit
Molly
from this. Yeah, no, but it's one of my most sought after offers now, as I have people coming to me all the time wanting to do New York Bridal Fashion Week mentorships. So much so that I had to actually limit it because I found that it was overwhelming to offer it to that many people. And I think that there is just a very saturated experience with photographers at that space anyway. But so like that there bridges those two offers, whether it's photo or it's education. But then on top of that, I think my history of fine art, composition, working in galleries, being able to curate, lending that expertise to photographers who don't yet have it at a very attainable price point is so rewarding to me, because I have seen firsthand launching someone's website and within 24 hours them getting 4 inquiries, or literally when I did mine, I doubled my prices and booked my 3 highest like within 3 weeks of launching. I have multiple people who have come to me after launching their websites or their brand refinement, or if I'm just doing curation and implementation into a website, not even customization. how they feel about their work, the impact it is having on their confidence, then lends to them being stronger on a consultation, which then lends to them being able to answer the question about money in a more confident way, warranting an expertise that then allows a client to sign confidently knowing that they have an expert. That all, like, if anyone thinks those are disconnected, they're not. It is one lens to the other. And I think my most exciting thing that I'm working on right now are those overhauls, because I've seen the most growth and I've seen the most impact, not just on who these people are as artists, but their bank account doesn't lie. So that is what's getting me the most excited, because with anything, anytime you see reward and or results from action, it's often very like fulfilling and exciting to keep wanting to do those things. So that's where a lot of my energy is right now, just because the impact is huge and I love it.
Yeah. I love that. Like, you found a way to look at, okay, what are all these unique things and like ingredients?
The strengths.
Like an intentional diversification. It was like where it's actually less. Like you're like taking all these things and how they all complement each other into like the highest leverage that you can do on like output of like what this does to somebody's business if they can launch and double their pricing. Like that's like a really just like fulfilling personally, and then obviously is very valuable. Like if you could double somebody's prices, that's huge, and let them be confident, not only their prices, but also work with who they want to work with. And
right.
Like attract that. Like that is such a cool thing where you've been able to, I think it's a really interesting progression of like, you've grown your own business and you did it with your own brand, like you said. And now it's like, okay, now I'm coaching other people and helping them grow their business. And I found a way from going to one-on-one to group coaching. Now, okay, if I could help people do what I've already done and I'm good at,
right,
it's a win-win. That's where the value comes in. Of just,
and
like,
it is really like kind of like that white coat service, right? Where it's like so many people get stuck in the rut of like, okay, I need to upgrade this, or I need to update my website. I need a new template, but who's going to do it? Like, cause you wait because you're never going to have time. This is something then you hand off. And it's like in 2 to 3 weeks, you have the brand identity that you want, because you were able to give it to somebody who could identify your strengths, who could take your work and make you see it in a new way. And I think that's really important. And that common thread too is like, my wedding clients also love that I am so much of an expert that I'm teaching other people, or that I'm helping other people. That all goes hand in hand. So like you said, just kind of bridging all of those strengths and allowing that to be the business, and letting all the other stuff be bonus and or taken over by somebody else has been the most fruitful for me in terms of growing too.
Yeah, because it sounds like, and your whole education has all been based on the premise of like result based, or like you're focusing on like output of like, okay, what am I actually like cultivating out of this, instead of just like, okay, I created this thing and like it's not like your results oriented of like, how can I actually help tailor something specific and work with the people that my unique gifts elevate. And then for their side of just, I love your point of like, for a short couple weeks, like getting it done and done by someone where we're all artists, but we all have unique gifting, where I'm like, I could come in and like help, like, hey, if you got this curated and do that, like you have all this opportunity, but like, I'm not going to be the one to curate. Like, I'm like, you need to look more aesthetic. Ask Jessica. She's like,
see, and that's where
like, I don't post, but for you, you're like, oh my gosh, like you're a great photographer, but why are you showing this photo? Or if you, it could be, and it could work for planners too. It's like
everybody. I do it. I work. Like I work with so many different wedding pros and just creative entrepreneurs, like interior designer. Like I've worked with so many different people, and really it's about telling the story with the least amount of images in the most impactful way. Understanding that any fluff is going to dilute your brand. Understanding that, there is a certain type of arrangement and there's a certain type of emotion. We're working in such an emotionally driven field that in the wedding industry, that like we have to be mindful of the emotions that we're pulling from these images that we're putting on our website, not just hero images, but the in-between moments, the soft moments, the sentimental moments, all of that stuff. It's all things that we have to be mindful of. And like you said, to your point, it gets done quickly. Like my ADHD, the ability to hyper focus, like that is a benefit to you, like take advantage of it. So it's one of those things. But I think too, something that's been very, very prominent for me is I've spent a lot of money on education, and I've spent a lot of money on trying to be a better business person and everything everything that goes along with that. And it's so important to me to have mindful investment for when you were talking about rewards, like understanding that, one wedding booking, the additional revenue from one singular wedding booking is going to pay for your overhaul. Like that to me is what the goal is my goal is for you to make the money back ASAP. So mindful investment with really great reward is kind of been my business model. That's gonna change. It's gonna change as I grow. So that will definitely change. But I just think aesthetics, curation, brand awareness, and positioning is just so important. And if it's not a strength, seek it out. Not from me. There's so many people who can help with this, but it's really important to get that guidance.
It's so important. And there's like along those lines, there's this like principle like if something's true in one field, it needs to be true in another. So like we're talking about like, okay, like focusing on what you're really good at and like how do you like, as you distill down that's how you create more value and how you grow exponentially, where you get out of these like basically the solution to growth is doing less and focusing on what like your unique gifting is, right?
Yeah.
And that's where you get exponential growth time and time again. And if someone's in that spot where for you too, like you even said, but it rings true, as you do curation, you're like, get rid of the fluff, only show what's like true to your brand. And like, I just think it's so cool how it applies from like a business principle of like, who do you hire to like you literally going through that process. But if you don't have that skill set, focus on if you're great at networking and like connecting with people, go do that and
be the face, be the face of the brand.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as much as you can find like, what is your unique personality and how do you show that up? Because I think as a creative, like that's like the thing that no one can take away. And like, there's no competition. You're in a complete.
It's a one-of-one situation.
Yeah. It's a one-on-one. So I love it.
Yeah. Oh, well, so good.
We could talk forever. I know. Appreciate you taking the time. And if people
Thanks for
are
having
curious
me.
about, absolutely. If people are curious about your brand, okay, I don't want to butcher it. Brand curation deep dive. What's the deep dive?
Yeah, it's so what it is it's called, my education platform is called Make Pretty, Make Pretty Workshop. So I have high fashion forward wedding editorials for photographers and videographers to come and get that elite content and that, that portfolio changing content to implement. But these visual intensives, I call them brand aesthetic intensives. It's called Overhaul. And there are different components and different levels of it. But ultimately, it's me coming in and overhauling your visuals to make sure that they are cohesive from your website to your Instagram to your headshots, making sure everything is at the level at which you are hoping to be perceived. And then watching it grow from there. It's just so exciting. But that's the most current offer as of now.
Awesome. Well, we will make sure we'll link in the show notes, like the direct link to that. And also, your website, if anyone's curious, check out Molly's website. Her own personal website is insane. Like I was just looking at it, I was like, I forgot how good it was. So,
I just did a little, re-update on that winter season when I had that time to rest and really kind of refocus and refine my own aesthetics after working on so many of others last year. But and if anyone is listening to this and decides to come on board for an overhaul or is interested, just be sure to mention the podcast. I'll give you some savings.
Woo. Well, thank you for that. We really appreciate it. Well, thank you, Molly. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I hope to see you around soon.
You will.